The Cincinnati Reds offseason. What is the reality of it? Should we feel good? Should we feel like the team hasn't done enough? And what's coming next? That, as well as who am I? Why am I here? And how is this podcast going to go? That's what we're talking about today on the debut episode of the Reds Reality Podcast. I'm Josh Razauskas, and welcome to the Reds Reality Podcast, the podcast where I bring you reality as I see it on all things the Cincinnati Reds. So, who am I? What is my backstory? We got to do the typical thing of setting up the show before we can get into the show and talk about where we want this show to go. So, I am a Reds fan going back for as long as I can literally remember. My Uncle Woody, who since passed away, was like my second father, instilled in me that Major League Baseball, and in particularly the Cincinnati Reds, was a way of life to live like no other for as long as I can remember. And my best memories still, to this day, are back before streaming became a thing, when everyone still needed cable, or do we still need cable? More on that later. But traditional linear cable was a thing. My Uncle Woody would do the old-fashioned thing of, here's the TV in one room, let's get some big giant cables and some big giant extension cords. And he had that Reds broadcast going all the way from its source in the living room all the way out to his back porch, where we would sit and watch the games and feel like we were at the ballpark. And he would also have old VHS recordings of when he grew up and he watched the big red machine, and telling me about how that is the single greatest team of all time in Major League Baseball history, and it still is today. That has not changed and probably never will. So that's how far back as I go. That's my passion for this team, and the only reasons that I have not ever talked about the Reds in podcast form are, one, when I first started making content, I had intended to be a sports content creator, but I did one movie review that really took off on my original channel, so I ended up loving that community and just staying in it. Two, I have not had the equipment necessary to do a daily podcast, because once the off season ends, we all know that to do a sports podcast properly, it's gonna be daily. So I have not had the equipment necessary to do daily videos until now. Thank you to everyone who made that possible. My clients, and my friends, and my family. I've now got the M1 Mac Mini, the BenQ monitor, and the Elgato Face Cam Pro. So we are good to go with the ability to make sure we can do daily podcasts, as well as the license, almost forgot about that, to Ecamm Pro to utilize for recording and streaming. So I'm not going to name everybody by name, because I don't know if everyone wants to be mentioned by name or not. But everyone that helped me to make this show happen today, and the one person who I probably can mention, he probably would be happy that I mentioned him, because they've been big supporters of me as a supporter of them and encouraging me to come here today. Jeff Carr, the co-host of the Locked On Reds podcast, will in future episodes provide for us the overlays that we will be able to use so that we can look like a traditional podcast, where I've got the layout of the show side by side with us as we break the events of the day down. So thank you, Jeff, for that. And Jeff was also the very first subscriber of the Reds Reality Podcast channel. So you're awesome, dude. Thank you very, very much. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, the final thing before we can get into the meat of the show is, why did I choose the name Reds Reality Podcast? Well, number one, the obvious names you would think about for baseball podcasts were pretty much taken. Stuff like batter's eye, fielding position, things like that were already not available. And I wanted something that was Reds specific for this show. I do plan on making other content. I've already set up Reality of Sports, which is going to be my sports channel that is going to be about just the sports news of the day. I already set that channel up as well. And come next football season, we're most likely going to be doing a show on the Buckeyes and a show on the Bengals as well. And actually the first video on the all-encompassing sports channel, because of the national championship coming up, that will be the first video going up there, talking about the Buckeyes' chances. And what is this current landscape of college football? Is this a good thing? A bad thing? Like, how should we all actually be feeling about this right now? So that'll be topic number one there. The reality name, back before it became commonplace for everyone to be more comfortable utilizing their actual name in order to grow an online career, everyone was using nicknames, of course, and my nickname was Razman's Reality because to me, that sounded like a show. So I figured I'm finally going to be entering the sports world the way I've always wanted to as a podcaster. Why not pay homage to a little bit of my past and create the Reality Sports Network? So there you go. The obligatory introduction aspects of the first episode done and dusted. Let's break down this Reds offseason, talk about things in the order they happened, and then, of course, end it off with where do we feel like we're at right now. So the first big news, of course, probably the biggest news to happen to the Reds in many years, the hiring of one Terry Tito Francona as the new manager for 2025 and beyond. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am by this. Gone are the days of people just being promoted within the system. Gone are the days of passive leadership that makes excuses, that always has a reason, that barely says anything. No, the Reds management now on the field is a proven winner, a two-time World Series champion manager, a man who led another team from the other side of Ohio to a World Series appearance. Terry Francona equals winning. And winning history breeds a culture of believability and accountability. And that's what this team has needed for so long. And that's what this young core that we have is going to fit from so well. And it's just so refreshing to have a manager who also is not afraid to let the fandom and the media in on who he is. Like, how many times did we watch a David Bell press conference? I mean, you've heard it on every Reds podcast or seen it, depending on how you consume them for years. Talking about David Bell would just be sitting there in a post-game show going, well, today didn't go as planned, but we're close. We're getting there. We're going to go get them. The same generic answers with a very monotone tone that, quite frankly, just wasn't inspiring at all. And if it wasn't inspiring us, it clearly was not inspiring the players either. So we got a whole new chapter now, a whole new way of leadership and an energy and a believability we have not had in terms of on the field in years and years and years, and I am excited and pumped about it. And that momentum continued with big thing number 2 this offseason, the long-rumored trade of one Jonathan India actually did happen when India was traded to the Kansas City Royals for one Brady Singer, who is a very, very steady starting pitcher, and he had 20 plus starts for the Kansas City Royals a year ago, and that is something that the Reds just haven't had. The Reds haven't had that arm that they know they can run week in and week out in his spot. He's very not injury prone. He's extremely reliable, and he puts up decent numbers. And he's exactly the kind of stabilization piece that this rotation needed. And I'm very, very glad that we have him, because now you look at this rotation on paper, you've got Hunter Green, you've got Brady Singer, you've got Andrew Abbott, you've got a returning Nick Martinez, who was the second piece, who we'll talk about here in a moment more. But you've got Nick Martinez, and then you've got probably Nick Lodolo. And if Lodolo struggles, you've got the guy who proved himself at the end of last season in Brett Lauder, ready to go. You've got the Chases down in the minor leagues. You got so many pieces that make you feel really, really good about this starting pitching, and about how you're not necessarily going to be worried about that end of things. I think it probably surprised a lot of people getting into topic number 3 of the offseason when Nick Martinez did accept his qualifying offer. A lot of people probably thought he would test free agency, but you know what? I think Nick Martinez probably looked at the landscape of available pitchers in 2025 and was like, if I want to make a decent amount of money, I'm probably not going to get any more than I would have gotten from my qualifying offer. I know the Reds. I know this team. I had success here. Why not come back? And because I feel like I can contribute as a starter, and I've proven that I can do that. And to me, it's as simple as that. And also, Nick is not the kind of guy who, if it comes to it in the 2025 calendar year, is going to refuse to go back to the bullpen and be utilized as that valuable swingman if it ends up being what's best for the team. Nick just wants to win. So I think it makes perfect sense that he took that deal and is back with his team. The Reds filled the hole of backup catcher. Luke Maile is not returning. Instead, we got from the New York Yankees for one Fernando Cruz and a minor leaguer, one Jose Trevino as a backup catcher from, as I said, the Yankees. And I really like Trevino because I think Trevino is a huge upgrade defensively. Whenever you're putting your backup catcher out there every 5th day, you want to feel like you're gaining something from losing your steady everyday guy when he needs to rest. And what you're gaining in Trevino is you're gaining a guy in Jose that is an extremely good defender. He is a platinum glove defender. He is tremendous at framing, and he will be able to control the other team's running game really, really well. So I like the pickup for the Reds. I think it's a huge upgrade at the backup catcher spot. A++ for me on that one. Next up was the rather shocking trade in some ways for one Gavin Lux from the LA Dodgers. And this one really surprised me because it's not what we've been screaming about. We'll get into that to end the show off. It's not what we've been screaming about. It's not the move that we thought we needed. But you know what? It's a move that I think is really going to help this team because Gavin Lutz can do one of two things. He can be that chameleon that the Reds were hoping that Jonathan India might have been able to be last year had it not been for injury. He can play multiple positions. He can play second. He can play short. He can play the outfield if you need him to. But he's extremely good. He's an extremely good, I meant to say, second baseman. And if you decide that Gavin Lux is good enough to be an everyday ball player, and you want him to be an everyday ball player with this team, it allows you to plug Gavin Lutz at second base, move Matt McLain to short, move Ellie De La Cruz to third. You don't have to worry about Noelvi Marte isn't there yet. Noelvi Marte can stay in AAA where he should be based on what he did on the field without the PEDs last year. He can go down to AAA and prove whether or not he is the guy that we thought he was when we picked him up from Seattle in the Jose Castillo trade. And we don't have to worry about whether or not we are tied to him because we have no better choice. And you've got Jeimer Candelario, who can move back and forth between spelling Ellie at third. He can play first most of the time, or preferably be at DH with Spencer Steer and Christian Encarnacion Strand CES splitting time at first. So to me, that's what I would do with the addition of Gavin Lutz on this team. What the team does, I think, will 100% depend on how spring training shakes out, whether or not they are certain that Matt McLain has stayed on track like he has this entire offseason and is definitely going to be on the roster from day one in 2025. If they don't feel like him unfortunately missing all of 2024 with that shoulder injury has impeded him too much to rely on him as an everyday player or not. But yeah, I think that all of the ducks being in a row the way the team wants, I think that is the best version of the team. But again, it just depends on how all the pieces come out of spring training and what the Reds decide to do, because they might have just a little bit more money than they thought they were going to have, because the final big bullet point of the offseason to talk about is something that we didn't really expect to talk about until it dropped on Monday. I believe it was Monday morning, might have been Monday afternoon. Not entirely sure about the timing of it, but the Reds suddenly reversed course. And instead of them having their games broadcast by MLB this year and produced by MLB, and thus you pay for them locally in market through the MLB app, they've now gone back to the former Bally Sports, now known as FanDuel Sports, for a year, and you will have that direct-to-consumer option if you don't have cable, which is, I think, the most important thing about the change. Is those of us who struggled, our VPN didn't always work. We just didn't want to pay the cable replacement prices or the actual cable prices for stations that we don't watch. That is no longer going to be an issue, because we will have that direct to consumer option. We don't know for sure yet what that direct consumer option will be, but based on the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Cleveland Cavaliers, it should be about $20 to $30 per month and something like between 75 to 90 per the season. So, all in all, not too much change. I would have preferably liked the Reds to have gone the MLB route, which is the rumor that they're going to officially do that next year, that this was just a 1-year deal from FanDuel trying to hang on to the old ways, trying to remain relevant, and trying not to let themselves as a parent company under their new ownership go completely under. They know the Reds is a valuable commodity. No one's going to pay for any version of the now FanDuel Sports Network to just watch the Blue Jackets or just watch the Cavaliers. I don't believe. The Cincinnati Reds are a huge part of that. So to have the Reds now be back with the sports group makes sense for that sports group to want the Reds. And the good thing about it, even though it's not what I would have preferred, having been done simply because the MLB app has proven itself to be much more reliable in the past than the Bally app was. Hopefully, the new FanDuel skin/name means that they will make improvements to that app. It won't be as delayed as it would be if you've got it coming through a direct cable or satellite signal, and we won't see too much of a drop off with that direct consumer option that I will be using, that I believe the majority of us will be using, because why would we pay for a second package or just pay for a package in general that's going to either way be full of channels that we don't want to watch? So I think the majority of us are going to utilize this direct-to-consumer option. So hopefully it won't be anything that we can't get enjoyment out of and that will annoy us to be part of our team this year. All that being said, though, the really good thing about it is that the Reds may have gotten more money. I don't think it's going to be the 60,000 per season that it was for when it was Bally, or is it 60 million? It's either 60,000 or 60 million. I apologize. My script that I'm going off of, my bullet points say 60 million, but that seems like a hefty price to me. 60 million. So maybe 60,000 is actually the price. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, the Reds, I think, regardless of what they were given by FanDuel Sports, I think now have a little bit more money to play with, which means, can they finally do the elephant in the room? Can they finally give us what we've been screaming about? I told you I would get back to it. Where is the right-handed outfielder? Where is the biggest problem that this team has had, the biggest hole that it has needed to fill for however many years it has been now? Where is that guy? We missed out on the ability to get Teoscar Hernandez during the brief window that he was a free agent before he went back to LA. I think he would have always gone back to LA, but regardless, he was a free agent there for a minute. The Reds could have made a play for him. Anthony Santander has not signed yet, so Santander, to be honest, I'm not sure how you say it because I've heard it said both ways. So if he does sign with the team, hopefully we can get a definitive answer on whether it's Santander or Santander. But all I know is it's spelled Santander. But he's still out there. Will the Reds do the amazing thing, make a trade, open up even more salary room, and go and get him. I hope to high heaven that they do. I don't think that is extremely realistic, probably, because of the simple fact that he'll probably want more than what our budget will allow to give him. But I think they can still go get an outfielder. I think it would just be the entirety of Reds country riding beyond belief if we didn't go get that outfielder. But I think it's more likely that you're going to see a trade. I want them to go get Taylor Ward, or if you're looking at free agency, Randall Grichuk. I think those are the two best options right now. But Taylor Ward, to me, is the one that is reliable. He is a guy who you know what he's going to give you game in and game out. And he's just been on a terrible team for so long in the Angels that nobody really pays attention to him. So Taylor Ward right now is my number one choice for that right-handed option. And what I think is realistically available to the Reds, there is still the Luis Robert of it all out there. The Reds have been linked to a trade for Luis Robert for a long, long time. They've been labeled as a front runner for a trade for Luis Robert for a long, long time. If Luis Robert happened, that would be a let's have a press conference, let's watch the guy put on his jersey moment for sure. But I don't feel, and I don't think a lot of Reds fans probably feel either, that he may not necessarily be the best option because he is simply injury prone. And we have not had him for a full season in so long, and he's playing in such a bad market throughout his career. When he's on the field, I don't think we really know who Luis Robert is. And that's why I feel like maybe I don't want him. Would I complain about having him? Absolutely not. Because I think that Reds, from a business standpoint, would probably look at Luis Robert as 1A if Anthony Santander was 1-1. Like, the number one target was him. I think they would probably on paper look at Luis Robert as the other best option on paper from a control standpoint and from a fan happiness standpoint. So I would not be upset if they got Luis Robert, but I just don't know if they asked me to be Nick Kroll for a day as Reds GM, if I would say I'm going to go make the trade for Luis Robert. As I mentioned, I am more in the camp of either Randall Grichuk or preferably go out and make the trade for Taylor Ward. That's what I want to see happen. There are other options out there. Jerickson Profar is still out there. And there's a couple of guys who are lesser known guys out there. But I just feel like Taylor Ward is the guy. He should be the guy. So to end the show, how are we feeling? How should we be feeling? We should be feeling pretty darn great compared to previous off seasons with the Reds and what they have done as a whole in previous years. I think we should be feeling pretty darn great because of how much they've done and how little they've done in the past. I do think they know what their needs are, and I don't think that Tito would have come to Cincinnati and out of retirement to be our manager had he not been guaranteed certain things. And I don't believe the Reds would have gone and allowed those certain things not to happen. So we should feel pretty good. But we don't feel great yet because we don't have that big right-handed outfield piece. I believe he is going to come before spring training, hopefully very, very soon. So that's it. According to my raw footage countdown, we're at around 32 minutes as I begin to wrap up this show. So I don't know if that's going to be the length of the show every time, if it's going to be a 30-minute show every time, if it's going to be less than that, if it's going to be more than that. I think it's all going to depend on what the Reds news is, how much there is to discuss, and how I break that down. But the good thing about a video podcast that will hopefully be an audio podcast in the future as well is that you're your own boss. You don't have to be set in that. Hopefully you just built the audience that appreciates you and appreciate what you're all about. So as I sign off, let me say one other thing. As I mentioned earlier, I do have cerebral palsy, so if my head moves a lot in video as I'm talking, know that I do my best to look at myself in the camera the entire time. But when I'm also looking at bullet points to make sure that I don't miss anything that I want to talk about, and also just plain getting passionate, my head may move off camera from time to time. So just please be kind about that in your feedback, because it's something physically that I cannot control, and I don't do it on purpose. And I hope that you will be able to look past that and enjoy this ride with me. And also, as I wrap up the show, leave me a comment. Let me know how I did on this first episode, and let me know what you want to see. At the moment, we are only on Twitter/X, which is Reds Reality Pod. I am working on the rest of the social media, but the biggest thing for me today was to get the channel graphics done, which I finished last night, and then today being filming and editing and actually getting episode 1 out on to the YouTube sphere and actually existing within the world. So I thoroughly enjoyed being here. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed listening and watching, and I hope you'll continue to come back as I bring you reality as I see it on all things the Cincinnati Reds. Remember that life is only as good as what you make it. So make the choice to go out and do something great today, and I will see you all next time.